It takes a special kind of person to recognize the challenges and obstacles that other people face, and then to decide to do something about it, to help others instead of ourselves. Too many of us think, that's not my problem, and then we busy ourselves solving our own, generally getting on with our careers and earning more money. But life can have a way of catching you up and tripping you up. Take, for example, age. We're all young and able until we're not. And then you'll ask yourself two questions. Number one, why didn't I prepare better for this moment? And number two, why isn't anybody else helping me now? In today's show, I am talking to an industry expert on a topic that is endemic and growing and might catch up with you faster than you think. And then you will ask yourself those two questions. They say that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. Today is your opportunity to plant a tree. My guest today is Freddie Quek, Research Associate at Henley Business School, Technology Leader, Advisor, and Non-Executive Director. Freddie has spent his career at the intersection of technology and impact. He has led digital transformation across publishing, education, and technology with companies like Wiley, Reed Elsevier, and as the CTO of Times Higher Education. He helped create the World University Rankings and the SDG Impact Dashboard, helping universities understand how they meet the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Recognized as one of the UK's top technology leaders by Computer Weekly magazine and CIO 100, of which he's now a judge, Freddie is known for pioneering large-scale agile practices and the adoption of NoSQL long before it became mainstream. Beyond the boardroom, he founded Join the Dots to help tackle digital exclusion. He co-founded TechLink Ukraine to support displaced professionals, and now chairs the BCS Digital Divide Specialist Group. I cannot possibly do justice to his career and the impact he has had in such a brief introduction. Today, we will be discussing digital inclusion and what it means to be a responsible technology leader and how to balance the 3 Ps: profit, planet, and people, and why inclusion should be a core part of technology leadership and not an afterthought. We all take technology for granted, but for millions, even here in the UK, it's still beyond reach. If you want to lead with impact, or if you want to help your company make a genuine difference through their corporate social responsibility goals, then this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Freddie, thank you so much indeed for joining us here today. Now, today we're talking about digital exclusion. And actually, one of the things we're going to talk about is it digital exclusion or is it digital inclusion? But before we get into the topic, I'd like to start with you. I'd like to understand who you are and why this topic means so much to you.
Jeremy, thank you for having me. If I can start with saying that I am a technology professional. From the day I started, I was so interested in technology that I want to do everything technology, and I want everybody to come along with me on this journey. But in those days, I felt that I was the minority, I was the geek, I was the one that only cares about this and nobody does. But of course, we now know that that is not true. So as a technology leader, I've been in many different industry sectors, from travel, loyalty, insurance, financial services, education, the whole lot, to now also looking at how I can give back to my profession, because we all want to do that, and I have the privilege of doing that. Plus the fact that I think it is our social responsibility.
Right. And today, as I mentioned, we're talking about. So let's ask this first question: is it digital exclusion or is it digital inclusion? Exclusion seems to me we're talking about the people who are somehow excluded from technology, whereas inclusion is much more about the solution, almost like getting people included.
I would say that this landscape is even more complex, because you will find that there are even more terms that I will bring it up now. There's digital divide, there is digital poverty, there's digital participation, digital equity, digital equality, inequality. The point is, it doesn't matter which term we use. We do have an understanding that this digital world that many of us are taking for granted, there will be a segment of the population that for some reason they're not part of it. And I think that might be the best way to ask the question about, so what, and why do we care about that part that's not included, right?
Yeah. I mean, let's go there. Why should we care? So we're in a modern world. I mean, I've got an iPhone, I've got loads of computers, I've got an iPad, I've got internet. I'm okay. And I'm sure that everybody who is watching or listening to this was okay, right? So why should we care about the people who are not this side of the glass, as it were?
If I can offer a bit of context in terms of society as a whole, you can relate to the fact that, when we talk about industrial revolutions, we've seen, or we've understood what has happened, hundreds of years ago, right? The first generation industrial revolution, from the first to the second, took 100 years. The second to the third took 50 years. The third to the fourth took 25 years. And now, if we are talking about the AI, it's less than 5-10 years. So that is one of the reasons why, whether we like it or not, we're now in this part of society where we call it the digital world, the digital economy. So unless you are not a human on this earth, how can we not be part of this digital world? But having said that, I think one of the things that will be good for us to discuss today is, what does it mean about being digital? Is it a binary concept, or is it more complicated than just that?
And who are we talking about here? Before we talk about what exclusion and inclusion means, typically, who are people who are excluded? And are we talking here about the UK or Europe or the world?
This is a global issue. So if a simple measure of being digital, right, because I think these people can relate to this, is whether you have access to the internet or not. Would you be surprised if I say to you that globally 30% of the world's population do not have access to the internet? Would you be surprised or
Yes
shocked?
and no. Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I can imagine there would be, and I'm going to really generalize a lot here, but I can imagine there will be some places maybe in, I don't know, Africa or somewhere where the tribes are so nomadic and they live off the land and, maybe out in the deserts of Saudi Arabia, they're there with their camels and they don't need the internet and they're probably not connected. So 30% doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. So I think numbers do matter, right? So if you refer to that segment of the population, I don't think that is a large population, right? If you compare to the rest of the world. So the point here is that if this is where the world is going and it's about catering to the masses, to the majority, then if we assume that the digital world is here today, 30% sounds like it's a big gap from achieving being a digital participant, right?
And if
And
we
that is
brought,
the issue.
yeah, and if we brought it closer to home, if we think UK, for
Mm.
example, something that people here in the UK can relate to, who typically is digitally excluded here in the UK?
So if again, if we use the emergence of the internet, and therefore this is how we get to understand about digital, to be an example, you will find that, I remember when I started my career at that time, it felt like it was a generational thing, meaning that it's a matter of time before you get some people on it. And it's also a generational thing that you say you just leave some people behind because maybe it's not for them. So that's one way to look at it. And therefore, because of that, there's this perception that, you know what, there are people of a certain age, of a certain generation, let's just forget about them, right?
Mm.
Because it's not designed for them, which is why the tech profession, we use this concept of digital personas, where we design based on this principle of 80% means is good enough for everybody, right? So it's a 80% represent a majority. But if you look at where we are today, as the pace of technology keeps evolving faster and faster, the NHS is a great example where they are now trying to push everybody to use the NHS app to make a doctor's appointment. That's one example. Another example would be, imagine if you're trying to park your car today, and it's not about age anymore, right? It's about trying to park your car. And unless you have connectivity, unless you have a device, unless you have the app, there's no way you can park your car. So tell me, are we potentially excluding people for some reason they are not able to achieve that?
It's interesting you say that because, and I'm sure we will come on to the demographics of it a lot more. I guess you're immediately you begin to think of maybe elderly people because they're just not they've not had the depth of experience that you and I have had. We've lived our lives on tech, but if you're above a certain age, maybe you didn't get into there. But even I went to, as it happens, I had an appointment at the hospital, went into the car park. I'm used to using Ringo because everyone has Ringo, but they changed the app, and it was an app I'd never seen before. And I got my phone out, and there was another chap standing there, and together it took us more than 10 minutes to sign up for this new application and try and pay for parking. And as a result, I mean, I know that I was late for my appointment, and it did make me think there will be some people who don't have the mental capacity, the experience, whatever it is that I have because of my experience with technology, who at that moment would not be able to overcome that problem.
Right. And I hope you can see, a simple thing that many of us are taking for granted today, it does affect us. I have the same challenge too, right? And this is why this issue is much bigger than just an age-related issue.
Let's talk about that then. So I think we can reasonably assume that there is a slice of people above a certain age who have never worked in technology. It's not been that important to them, and therefore they are inexperienced, for want of a better word, and therefore they are excluded. Who else are we talking about? Are we talking about money? Are we talking about location? What other factors sort of define somebody who may well be digitally excluded?
Yeah, this is quite a complex topic, in the sense that digital inclusion exclusion is not a separate standalone thing. It is to do with our own personal situation most of the time. If today you live in a very rich area because you are rich, but your area hasn't got the availability of services, then that's not defined by how rich you are. You will
Hmm.
have an availability issue. But there's also uh, a segment of the population, for example, children on school meals, socially disadvantaged households, and this is a few million of those people. They cannot afford either to have a device or to pay for the data plan to give them that access. So that's another issue, right? So you can see there are other also issues to relating to, let's say, your own personal situation, such as if you have a health related issue, your cognitive ability is impaired, or even physical impairment. It again affects your ability to be able to do that. And then there's another dimension which I think is really important. Sometimes we think of this problem as the problem of the have and the have-nots.
Hmm.
So that's easy to, right? So this is why we talk about the affordability thing, right? But what about those who can and cannot? Which is where again we talk about. But why can't they? Maybe it's a physical or cognitive. But there's also those who will and those who will not, and why, right? So I think we're now tapping into the fact that if you look at across those three dimensions, there will be also a certain population. Again, I'm not using age as the factor. That fact that either they do not understand, they do not have the opportunity to understand the benefit, or simply just as a human being, you felt like the world is moving too fast. And this is yet another thing. And I don't want to show that I don't really know this thing. So guess what? Let me just avoid it altogether. Right. So it affects our confidence, it affects our motivation. And therefore, this is yet another factor why people are excluded.
In a minute, I'd like to start talking about who we think should be listening to this conversation, because there will be some people in a position where they can do something about it. But let me ask you a hard question first of all. Let me sort of hit you, as it were, right on the chin. Why should we care? Why should we be bothered that there are some people who are excluded? And as I say, we're going to talk about some specific people who maybe can do something about it. Why should they care? Why should they be motivated to try and solve this problem?
Okay, so I'm going to give you my response from a number of different lenses, right? Let me start from the lens of being a technology professional. I think as a technology professional, if our responsibility is to use technology to solve problems, then unless we're aware that this whole concept of personas, we're only designing for 80% and we're ignoring the 20%, surely that is something that we need to do something about. Whether is it for commercial reasons or not, we are now professionally, either intentionally or unintentionally, excluding the design for the 20%. So that's
And
from a
being commercial is an important factor here, isn't it? Because if I'm running a business and my service or product is accessed digitally, I would imagine, and again, I'm being deliberately selfish here, but I would imagine that most of my customers, the people that I want to get money from, essentially, are within that 80%. And therefore, to a degree, I can sort of say, I don't really care about the 20%. Then they're not attractive for me to include.
Yeah, I think that is a very fair point, right? But you can see the nuances comes in too, because if that is your commercial purpose of running that business, you have every right to make that business decision, right? But if you are a public sector organization
Mm-hmm.
where it's about public service, it's about public good, and if you don't think about it the right way, then are we not actually not solving the problem, but we're creating a problem?
Yeah,
And
I
that's the
see
point
that.
I'm making, right?
Yeah.
And this is why, in fact, this on Wednesday, I'm at Think Digital Government, where I'm talking about this topic about digital inclusion in terms of how we design solutions that can be more inclusive. So it is a solvable problem, but it's just about whether are we consciously aware that we are currently designing a solution that is not quite inclusive.
Let's broaden it out then. So let's um, let's make the leap of faith and say, yes, collectively, we're going to try and solve this. What does it mean? How do we, um, what do we do with our technology in order that those 20% that we're talking about now can actually access this product or service and therefore are included rather than excluded?
Yeah, I think for a long time, just because maybe we can use the excuse that the the technology sector, all this digital stuff is fairly new, therefore very immature. So you can understand why we have very broad brushstrokes in terms of how we think about it, right? But I want to answer your question earlier on. Why does it matter? Why does it care? Right? So this is the thing that dawned on me. Remember, I talked about the different lenses. So if I put the lens of myself as an individual, today I feel very privileged that as a technology professional, I have this superpower that I take for granted, that I can just use any devices to solve any problem and do anything, and get the benefit of all the services out there. That is what I'm used to. But I'm now exposed to this reality in the future where, because of age, both my physical and cognitive ability would degrade. The world will be moving too fast, and I will be left behind. So because of that realization that is going to happen to me, myself too, this is why now I am hoping that others will realize that it's not about somebody else. It's not about affecting somebody else. It's affecting all of us eventually. So if we are taking this approach to say it doesn't matter, do you want to be part of that 20% that people make you feel that you don't matter?
I mean, I think you've already said it, but I'm also getting older, and I think you do realize you are not eternally young, and you're not eternally able to keep your finger on the very fast moving world of technology. I mean, you talked about earlier on the pace of industrial
Yeah.
change and this AI. I mean, I think it's only been, was it April of 24 or something like that, that Chat GPT came out, and now everything is AI. And I wonder, I do worry about what will come next that would just pass me by completely.
So
And,
so you're
I find my
getting
kids are using it, and
right. So you're getting the point I'm making, and just this is my reality check too. I used to be the first one in my organization, in my household, to be exposed to the latest thing, and I'll be asked, what is this thing? What can I do about it? And I would have a good answer because I was up to it. Now I'm relying on my 18-year-old son who knows everything more than I do. There you go.
has he brought 6-7 to you yet? Are you familiar with
Yes,
6-7?
yes, 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 I do.
Yeah, I
But
had
this
to
is
ask what
why
that was.
having children is great, because I can see through from their lenses, which otherwise I would not have that opportunity to really understand the new world. And this is why it's so important that, for your question again about why does it matter, for those of us who are in this profession where we have this superpower that we can do something about, it's important that we understand these issues so that we help ourselves and help future generations to be able to navigate through this in a much better way than sort of being ignorant about it and get caught up in that world. And guess what? The world is not going to help anybody when we get to that stage. And what did we do for ourselves when we had the chance? And that is why it's so important.
So you're almost saying pay it forward because,
Yes.
yeah. Um,
Yes.
and when I look at the world of AI, we can talk about that for as long as we like, but it's definitely moving so fast and it's becoming central to a lot of what we do. But I also wonder, it seems to be driven by a very small number of people or companies or organizations. And I've got a whole show coming up on this, by the way, with a fantastic guest, and we're going to talk about this very thing. But it seems to be driven by a very small number of people and corporations. And yes, there is some sort of general good. My spell check is a lot better and my grammar is a lot better, and I've got a bit of automation in my life. But if you take it even further into the world of robotics, and a lot of the drive is around commercial success for the companies that make it. And actually what it's doing is, um, it's going beyond inclusion and giving me new features that I can use because they're AI. And they're actually excluding me from the world of work because my job will go. And I'm wondering if you take that through to its end, if it's through to the end game of AI, is AI digitally exclusive?
So there are many ways to answer this question. If you look at the trend of what happens during each transition from one industrial revolution to another, there is a pattern. And the pattern is that, of course, some jobs would go, right? When you used to be an agricultural economy that becomes something else. So that is part of the trend. So I think one way to look at it is looking at AI as just another technology trend that has got massive impact on transforming societies and industries. And if you take in that spirit, then you'll find that it has to go through a certain period of transition. And that's what we're seeing now. But if you look at it specifically around the potential of this technology compared to all the other stuff, then there's a different lens again. And what I would say is that so far, at least in our lifetime, I have seen a few things that has blown my mind. The internet being one, and it's great. The difference is companies and individuals have time to get on to the internet. As I said, 30% of the world's population are not. They still have time to get on it. It's a matter of hopefully making that more available and solving all the other problems. They will get on it, right? So that's how you have time to solve that problem. But if you look at AI and the pace of change, the pace is completely at another level. What what I learned yesterday is really obsolete. I need to learn something tomorrow.
Hmm.
So at one level, you're right. It feels like it's really creating a wider gap for the haves and the have-nots. That's one way to look at it. But I also want to draw out the other dimension of it, and this is the reason why, as technology leaders, we do have a responsibility to approach things in a very sort of systemic way, in a strategic way, holistic thinking, all those things, all those good stuff, rather than you know being biased and pick a small thing, right? So you got to look at it in a balanced way. Technology per se is not bad. It's how you use it that matters. So if we are careful enough about how we deal with evolving technologies and how we enable technology to help us in our professional and personal lives, that is a very responsible approach. And that is where we got to do more as technology leaders to help with educating ourselves and others about how to navigate through that landscape. But if we don't, then guess what? We're always constantly looking for either opportunities to have personal gains, which is one part, or to see that it's going to be challenging for others that we can ignore, right? So the one good thing I want to draw about AI is that there has been some problems in the past that has been impossible to solve, right? So we talk about the excluded 20%, why you cannot design for 20%. But guess what? With AI, now you have a chance to design something specific for Jeremy, specific for Freddie. That I see as the huge potential, benefit of using AI.
The reason I wanted to go down that was twofold. One was, and I run AI teams, right? So I'm at the edge almost of this. Not to the not. I mean, obviously, there's people who have done an awful lot more, but I think I'm further forward than a lot of people. But I still feel that if you imagine AI as a tennis ball, I still know about the fluffy layer. There's so much inside that I just do not know, and I feel quite excluded by that. And the second reason I wanted to bring up is because if this is true, if AI is accelerating so fast that it's really hard to keep up with, it's not going to be your 80, 70, 60-year-olds or even your 50s and 40s. It's your 30s and your 20s who will actually begin to be excluded from this.
Yes, and if I can share one example, if again look at the lens of this is just another technology, how do we do it? So let me give you this example. Last year, the internet celebrated its 50th anniversary, and I attended this celebration at the Royal Society. And what was really interesting was there was a workshop about the hopes and fears and expectations of the next 50 years. So I find myself in this workshop where there are two schools of thought. All right, just like what we're discussing about AI, is it good or AI is it bad? So let me sort of share this with you, right? The internet, for whatever, Tim Berners-Lee was there, and if you've heard him, he says things like, "I wanted this for everybody, but it didn't turn out that way." So we need now have a chance to make sure that we steer the next 50 years in the right way. So I think that's good. That's very responsible of the founder of the internet who said those things. But then if you look at the people on the ground, like you and I having this conversation, and if you and I have a chance to do something about it, what will we choose to do? So one narrative is that the internet has been great. We want the internet to continue to prosper for the next 50 years. I think some of us can relate and agree with that narrative, right?
Yep, I agree. Yep.
You agree, right? Good, because
Yep.
it's been a good thing, even though some things have not been good, like fake news and all those things, but generally it's a good thing.
I'd say it's been phenomenal. When I look back at my career, if it hadn't been for the internet, I mean, I have
It's one
learned
of the
so much,
huge,
and I've made money from the internet, which is completely free. I mean, it's
right,
amazing.
amazing,
Yes.
right? Okay, so that's one view. But then
Yeah.
look at the other view, which is where, you know, you have the narrative about, but we got to save the planet. We're using too much
Yeah.
energy. AI is just another level of using energy. But you know what? The internet too. not as much, but it still uses energy. So the question here is that if it's consuming so much energy just to run the internet, should we think about not having the internet? So this is why I find that workshop to be really enlightening. And if I were to be asked a question about how to answer the question, which is relating to AI here, then here's my answer. I'm putting the lens on as a technology professional, and my profession, my goal in life is to make sure that we use technology to benefit whoever that needs to benefit. Ideally, it should be for the good, general good, rather than for the few, right? So it has to be about that, and therefore, for that, I would focus my energy on how I can create an internet in the next 50 years that's going to be energy efficient to solve that problem, rather than to question whether the internet is a good thing or a bad thing, because I cannot answer that question, but I can answer the other one. So that would be my answer to about AI too. I would be taking responsibility for my own actions and thinking around the things that I can do something about, rather than the bigger question where everybody can be part of it, but it doesn't really lead us anywhere.
What does the world look like if we solve digital exclusion? And I know that we can look at isolated cases, the senior trying to pay for their parking ticket or trying to get a doctor's appointment, but they can't use the app. We can look at individual situations, but take it broader. What does the world look like if we can solve digital exclusion?
I think for me, is about making sure that technology is not for the few, but we democratize technology that is for everybody. That has to be the main ambition that we all need to have about technology, rather than, oh, this is only for certain things. Of course, there will be certain technologies. For example, you design for war, and we don't want the majority to have it, right? That's fine, because it's a deterrent, all those things. But generally, surely we want to make sure that we are able to help, to guide, to utilize, and to help others and ourselves to consume technology in a way that is for the greater good, because no civilization ever stands still. And if technology is today's driver for helping us to all get a better life, whatever better life means. For example, in those olden days, we were just talking about having a roof that has got a lot of noises because we don't have proper roofs in the past. And if now that means that everybody has the opportunity to have a proper roof over their shelter, over their head, then why are we not making sure that everybody has the opportunity to have that?
And what does that entry point look like? Is it that everybody has a device? Is it that everybody has connection to the internet? Is it that the user experience on those devices or services is easier to learn? What does that entry point look like?
So you talk about how transformative the internet has been for you, right? And for all of us, I think we can all agree to that.
Yeah,
But
agree.
let me
Yeah.
paint you a world before the internet so that you can see where I'm coming from. I used to be in the telecom sector, so I know this. I'm qualified to speak about this. Yeah. The Before the internet came along, the whole world was relying on telephone lines. This is why you have BT in the UK, and many countries have their national carriers. And the objective in life was to make sure that every household has a landline that enables them to have a phone. And that is because this is one of the United Nations human rights, the right to communicate. And this is why many governments take responsibilities to solve that problem. But when I got involved and I was working in the United Nations, I challenged them on the fact that that measure is not realistic, because that measure of having landlines to every household is called tele density, the number of landlines per household. And I said to them, that is not realistic, because if you look at Africa as a region, because of their terrain, it's impossible to run landlines to every household. So you have Africa as a region that was completely excluded because of this great idea to solve that problem. Then what happened was mobile technology came along, and guess which region was the first to adopt mobile technology at scale? the African region. And today, that problem that we used to have is no longer there. So you can see how technology, if we use it for the right purpose, if we solve it for the right, and for the right reasons, it is possible. I always believe that if we have a problem, and this is a human condition, we are clever enough to always find ways to solve problems. So, such as things like going to the moon. You would think that it's hard to imagine, but that has happened. And today, I can imagine there's a lot more things that we cannot imagine today, but it will happen tomorrow.
So what does it look like then? So I mean, the situation you just described about a very physical problem, phone lines being connected to very, very remote parts of the world, suddenly mobile technology comes on, just completely pushes aside the
Yeah.
physical constraints. What does it mean next then? How do we now solve what's remaining of digital exclusion? If it's not just give everybody a mobile because there's a mobile signal, what is it?
Yeah, I think because this is about technology, right? So I think if we believe that it is our duty as a civilization to really enable everybody to have the right to communicate, then having access to the means, to the tools of doing that is so important. We may be in the past writing letters. These days, we don't need to do that. Why? Because technology is enabling us to do it in a different way. So one of the things that we need to do is we got to think of every individual. Surely they need to have access, at least access, if not their own personal device that allows them to achieve that goal, or being able to use that as a communication tool to address their need to be able to communicate. However, you can see these days it's more than just communication. So if you can address that essential sort of feature, then guess what? It also enables you to do other stuff to give you a better quality of life if you can. For example, if people are saying to me, today you're digital excluded, so therefore don't care about you. But what if they are using it for learning? What if they're using that for entertainment? Are they being excluded from having the rights as any normal human being to be able to enjoy those benefits? Do you see what I mean? So it's now
Yeah.
a much bigger thing. So if we can think about it in a more holistic way, sure, make sure everybody has either access or have their own personal device that allows them to communicate. I want to be able to communicate with my children, with my friends, no matter how old I am, no matter where I am. I want to be able to do that. But consequently, if I'm able to use that for entertainment because I'm solving other social problems, I'm solving loneliness problem, I'm solving the issues of being able to help somebody who needs my help, then I think that's a worthwhile thing to make sure that we at least solve that essential problem of giving everybody access to some device.
Some years ago, I actually went to Africa because I built a mobile payments platform, and it wasn't for smartphones, which is super clever. But if you are 20 miles and it's a walk from the nearest bank, paying for things is really hard, especially if you want to buy things from overseas. So the app that I built in conjunction with a company I know there was that I could pay people via SMS and just send a message. And for me, that was another layer of digital inclusion. We take
Right?
payments as, I mean, I don't carry cash anymore. When
Yeah,
my kid, I
same
went
here.
out to a firework display on a Friday night with my son. He said, "Dad, can I have 10 quid to go?" And I said, "I haven't got 10 quid. Borrow my phone." I mean, we're just used to that now. But if you're in a place where that just does not exist, if you cannot pay, putting something in that person's hand where now they can pay for stuff is a massive inclusion factor.
Exactly. Exactly. So you can see that, there are so many possibilities and benefits of enabling everybody to have access to technologies that we all take for granted. But unfortunately, that is not the reality today, right? Still.
Yeah. So let's move on to how we can fix this. And I know that, you've left behind a very simple handout, which has just got a couple of bullet points. I don't think we'll go through that particularly here because I think our conversation will cover it, but it's something that people can download later. Let's think about who should be listening to you and this conversation, who is in a place to affect change? Who are you talking to?
I'm hoping that I'm using the voice and the platform that I have as a technology professional and leader to enable my peers, my professional, my profession to hear this. Because if you want to effect change, you want to do the things that you have control and influence over. So I'm not going to be talking to somebody else that I don't really know about them or about their profession to tell them what to do. Nobody likes to be told what to do, right?
Mhm.
But I think I have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility as technology professionals to understand how powerful technology is if we use it for good, and why it is our responsibility. One, at a organizational level, because these days everybody talks about corporate social responsibility. What is our role to help our organizations to have those conversations and take the right actions to address corporate social responsibility? That's at one level. But
So that's where a company steps beyond their immediate commercial enterprise and interest and reaches out beyond. And I mean, you mentioned it earlier on, sort of gives back and pays forward. They go beyond their commercial sphere and they do things which help people beyond that.
I want to come back to that as a separate point. So I'll come back to that. What I want to do now is to mention the fact that, other than CSR, which is at a corporate organizational level, let's talk about ourselves as professionals. As I mentioned, we do have this superpower that we take for granted that for others it's like, whoa, right? So what are we doing to take that personal social responsibility to make sure that ourselves, right? We start with ourselves, start with our peers, and therefore start with the people who we are then connected with, our family members, our local communities, all those things. What can we do to make sure that we are able to use this superpower that others can get either some help from, elevate something, or do the things that they have not been able to do? Surely, as a profession, we have that responsibility because we are the ones who not only create the technology, I'm using the royal we here, right? Create the technology. Therefore, we're also providing the solutions out there. We are also creating problems out there. So it surely has to start with us as a sector to take that responsibility.
Be more precise there, though, Freddie. So, I can understand why a company might motivate themselves and has some kind of an internal project to go, let's look at this. But the royal we that you talk about, like the individuals who might be listening or watching to this, who are not there, right? They're literally just at work. What can they do?
If I may sort of use my personal example so that you can see why I'm doing what I do now. During COVID, my children were being homeschooled, and they have the privilege of having a father who knows a thing or two about technology, and I see them struggle, and I see their schools struggle. And that was where I got exposed to this world where I'm like, oh, wow. So if they are struggling, I'm struggling, then what about others? So during that period, that is 2021, February onwards, I started talking to a number of my peers, and I was asked to get involved in a device donation campaign, and that's how it all started. And what was really interesting was that everybody I spoke with, they all thought it was a good idea. Let's do something. If only everybody who thought it was a good idea, they had put a tenner into this device donation campaign, we would have been able to raise sufficient funds to provide a sort of a school trust up up north, where they're only asking for 150 devices. But you know what? We failed miserably, and that's where I realized something is wrong, because there's intention, there's desire, but yet the actions and the outcome doesn't quite marry up. So what is going on here that we got to do something, right? And the point here is that I also got to a certain part where I realized that what can I do? I'm only an individual. Surely it's the responsibility of the government or some
It's
other rich
somebody
organization.
else's
Yeah,
problem to
somebody,
solve, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And then very quickly I realized that actually none of them can solve those problems. None. Because the richest person, the richest country cannot solve this problem. Why? If you remember the conversation we had earlier on about the how digital inclusion exclusion affects us all, it's not just about this thing as the thing on its side. It's actually integral to who we are on a daily basis, about our needs, our wants, and all those things. How do we address that totality of us being a human with all this other stuff that comes with it? And digital is one of those things that if you have it, it helps you a lot. If you don't have it, it can also hinder you a lot. And now you see why, if we are responsible on the supply chain, manufacturer of equipment, provider of digital solutions, professionals who are providing all these services to organizations and everybody else, what are we doing to help to make sure that it truly can sort of permeate through all levels of society, where people can see the goodness of it rather than not. So this is why it's so important that tech professionals and tech organizations do see this as our both our corporate and personal responsibility to do something about it.
So it sounds to me like I can relate to the COVID thing, because suddenly everyone was working from home. Loads of families didn't have a device. Their
Right?
children therefore couldn't learn. So a kind of, if I say quick fix, but an obvious fix, is to provide devices so that the children then can be educated. We're post COVID now. I imagine that there's still a lot of people who are in that situation, but the immediate need maybe is smaller because we're not being homeschooled. But are you saying that the most effective thing that people can do, and we'll come on to sort of senior leaders in a second because they have the opportunity to have more impact, but just your regular person, are you saying that the most impactful thing they can do is donate kit or donate money or donate time?
I would say anything that they feel they can and they want to. So it's not about pigeonholing people into this is to do this. So in fact, I created a dashboard that shows that to help somebody to participate in this. So this is another word, digital participation. To be able to participate fully in this digital world, it requires joining the dots of many dots.
Yeah, and
If you
join the
don't have a
dots, by the way,
device,
is something we were going to talk about. Join the dots is something that you have started. Maybe it's a good moment to just introduce Join the Dots.
sure. So joining the dots started during COVID as a consequence of speaking to my peers. I spoke to 60 leaders over 3 weeks. And then that's where I realized that, wow, I'm not the only one that is thinking about this issue and realizing that this is a big issue. And it dawned on me on how can I use this data. So I'm a researcher, and that's where I started my doctoral research. And it sometimes lies about timing. So I was able to use that as a way to talk to my peers, because it was about finding my tribe. And that's why I talk to leaders. And now I realize that I've got this good data from 60 leaders in the UK. What am I going to do about this data that is so powerful in terms of what it's telling me? And this is why I thought I need to do something. And joining the dots is about a more joined up approach across the tech sector. So this is a bottom up, joining up the tech communities and professions. So currently, I managed to join up 16 of those communities. The BCS Charter Body for IT Professionals is one of them. Charity IT Leaders is another one of them. Horizon is another one of them. Open UK is another one. So there's 16 of those communities. So you can imagine a number of our peers in this profession, they will be a member of one of those or many of those communities, because the profession is not so mature that we have one place to go to and say, this is who we are, like the doctors or the lawyers or the accountants, right? We don't have that. So this is how joining the dots is about us not competing, but being more joined up in our thinking and action to address digital inclusion. Because I believe, and not just me, the sector believes that if we play to the strengths of what the tech sector has been good at doing, which is to create open ecosystems where everybody can contribute and consume from, we should take that approach and thinking into society at large, so that we can also help to solve other problems at scale. And this is what joining the dots is about.
So if someone's listening and they want to get involved with Join the Dots, is this something that's just sort of for senior leaders of companies, or could I get involved and help out?
Yeah, so this is the interesting thing, right? Because I started this as trying to join the dots across the UK in terms of finding communities of technology leaders. But technology leadership is not about somebody with the biggest job title and the biggest job title, right? It's about you can be a leader at any level. So if you are a technology professional in your own organization, you can already be a leader by having the right ideas about how to make IT good for society, right? So this is about leadership, in its sort of not not being boxed up by your job title or by your organization, but about a calling from your profession that you can lead with using technology for good.
So is that, and maybe it's a bit of both, but is it me taking responsibility and looking inward into my company at what we are doing to be sure that we are not at least not creating more digital exclusion, but possibly also solving some digital exclusion, as well as looking outside into organizations like Join the Dots, for example, and just seeing, okay, how can we contribute to that? Is it sort of both ways?
Yeah, it is. And this is why I mentioned earlier on about the CSR bit, because that's where you have to do it as part of your organization to contribute
Right.
towards that. But the other one is the personal bit. I think those two needs to go hand in hand. And if I may take this opportunity to introduce a newly established tech sector consortium, I'm delighted to help to establish this with my co-founder who was the CEO of the Digital Poverty Alliance. We both started at the same time. He established the Digital Poverty Alliance. I started the BCS Digital Divide Specialist Group. And over the years, we've been on this agenda where you can imagine digital inclusion has got so many things that you got to get right. But it dawned on us that everybody's trying to solve many problems, but who is the best people to solve one of those problems? And I call it, this is why I call it Johnny, one of those dots. And one of those dots is devices. So if you look at Johnny the Dots, if you need to if to get on the first rung of the digital level, if you do not have access to a device, you're never going to get started. But if
Correct.
you have a device and no data, no connectivity, you cannot use it, right? And if you have that, but you don't have skills, if you don't have a inclusive design that is fit for purpose, if you don't have cyber safe practices, so you can imagine it's about joining up, and if you don't have tech support, so you're about joining up many dots. So the very first dot here, guess what, is about devices. So the tech sector consortium, this is called the NextPath Device Consortium. It's been set up with the support of the top manufacturers in the UK, Lenovo, Dell, Google, your distributors, big distributors, your iTest, your processors, and also now with the joining the dots. This is where from the supply chain, all supply chain, it has created this consortium to help UK PLC to provide affordable devices at scale. And you can see this is an example where together we now stand a chance of solving that problem. But independently, individually, it is so hard to solve this problem. So the reason why I say this is because the message for tech companies and professionals out there today, if they need help to have those conversations with their own organization, whether is it their senior leaders or people who are responsible for sustainability and all those good stuff, it's actually very hard today for a tech leader. In fact, today I was just on a call with my peer, and they again confirm all these concerns that we all have about how do we even engage, because if you're not well positioned in organizations, you never have a chance. My research is about how do we position tech leaders to be in a position of equal in organizations at the top table, blah, 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 right? So that's one thing. But it's the same with this topic. So this consortium is going to be helping professionals and organizations to be able to point to it as a sector thing to say, if you want guidance about how to donate your devices or how to contribute devices or how to solve this problem at scale, we are now able to do it collectively as a sector. Because by doing that, we maximize ESG for our organization. So to your point about what's the benefit for organizations, we minimize e-waste for the UK tech sector. The UK tech sector is the number one, or the UK is the number one, number two e-waste country in the world. But more importantly, because of this joint up effort, we're able to help UK PLC to address this problem at scale. So I hope you can see it's not
Yeah.
about one thing, it's about all of them coming together, but it requires this being joined up to achieve that effect.
So the very first part of the solution is providing a device. Worry about connection and so on later, but get a device first of all. And I think I'm hearing three categories. One is manufacturers who maybe can charitably donate some, or maybe they've got some end of life machines or something. Secondly, we've got companies, big companies who have laptops and whatever inside their company which come to end of life, but they're still perfectly good. I presume that's a source of machines. And finally, of course, if my 8-year-old iPad is it won't take the latest iOS anymore, but still functioning, I presume I could also donate that. Is that fair?
So I now want to come back to this point that I asked you to hold your thought earlier on. So this is the triple bottom line message. Back in September, I was at the UK CIO 100 event, and this is where we celebrate the top 100 CIOs in the country. And
And you're a judge on that, I believe, aren't you, Freddie?
yes, and I asked this question of the audience, which are my peers, right? I asked them, have you heard about bottom line? And of course, everybody says, yes, we've all heard about. And what is bottom line? It's about money. It's about revenue.
Profit.
It's about profit.
Yeah.
Easy. Then I asked, have you heard about triple bottom line? In the academic literature, or people who are in this space, they know that very well. But you can see, as a sector, nobody knew about what this triple bottom line is. I was like, not surprised. Why? Because the reason why I know is because I'm doing research. So I'm exposed to the literature. But if I'm not doing research, then that is not a language or something that I relate to. But if I tell you what it is, you realize that everybody needs to know, everybody should know, and therefore everybody can do something about it. So the triple bottom line is that if you ask very commercially minded organization, their triple bottom line is profit, profit, profit.
Yep.
But this triple bottom line is that for organizations to be successful in the long run, it's about making sure that you achieve the balance of the three P's. Profit, of course, you must always, otherwise there's no reason to run a business. Planet. Now you see why the whole sustainability agenda is high up, because we talk it through via ESG and CSR, right? There's two.
Yep.
But the third one is people's social purpose. Remember I said earlier on, this will affect all of us, including
And
us.
this is not people as in employees.
No,
This is
it's
people
society at
broader.
large.
Yeah.
Right. And I say I want to come back to this because I hear you use the words charity. I hear you use the word donate. The point I'm making is that this is not about charity. It's not about nice to have. It's not about good to do. This is about being a successful organization needing to embrace understanding the three P's and doing something about those three P's. That is for your long-term longevity. And now you can see it's starting to change that narrative, because it's no longer about it's nice to have and maybe we'll get a sort of a Christmas present from Santa. No, this is about if you want your organization to be successful, if you want the planet to be successful, and you want our own personal lives to be successful, unless we achieve those three things in the right way, we're never going to get there. And this is why the tech sector consortium is set up not as a charity in the sense that it's about donation, because just to give you an understanding about scale, right? As technology leaders, we help organizations to achieve whatever targets. It tend to be double-digit growth, 10x what you do, those kinds of numbers. Scale, these are the kinds of things that we do. But did you know that all this charitable stuff that we're doing in the UK to provide device donations to help some people, do you know what percentage are we solving per year? If I tell you it's less than 1%, would that be shocking?
Yes, it would.
So if it's less than 1%, how do you think all this great effort that we're going to continue doing the same thing for the next 5 years, do you think we're ever going to get ourselves out of this situation?
What's the answer then, Freddie? What's the sea change? What has to happen?
So now you see why I mentioned the tech sector consortium. The tech sector consortium has been created to help to address this at scale. So I used the word scale a few times. So just imagine if we try to achieve a different number than the 1%. What if we aim for 5%? What if we aim for 10%? That's still small numbers, but we're going to start somewhere. What if at some point in the near future, we can achieve 50%. Then maybe we're getting closer to solving the problem. But otherwise, if we don't do something different, we're not going to get there. So this is why this approach is not about charity. This approach is about the tech sector creating a new channel of affordable devices that enables not any normal person to get it, but enables people who need them the most, who cannot afford them, the sort of the intermediaries that are supporting them. So part of the consortium will be intermediary partners. They're able to source these types of devices from the consortium so that they can get quality at quantity devices. Because today we don't have that. Right now, if you have a school that requires 40 laptops, guess what? They'll only get some and they'll get a mixture, and some of them probably will not last a year. What we're
Yeah.
saying is we need to solve the problem. If they need 40 type A laptops with this kind of spec, with Windows operating system and a 1-year warranty, that's what we're talking about. But we're doing it at scale. We're doing it at a price point that is affordable for the intermediaries such as regional and local authorities to be able to source that kind of resources rather than buy brand new products. Which so a good maths here that I did during COVID was Daily Mail started a device donation campaign. It was very well known because it was you had David Williams and David Beckham who was the front of that campaign. They raised 10.6 million pounds. Amazing, right?
Yeah. Put
But
Beckham in front of anything, you're going to get some cash.
correct. They ran 10.6. So you think the problem is solved this during COVID. But if you do the maths, in those days, even if you were to pay for the cheapest device, let's say at £350, which is impossible to get.
Yep.
But £350, you can only get 35,000 laptops with that kind of money. And the gap is if we use Marcus Rashford free school meals number, because that's the only real number that people know. By the way, it's still not real because nobody truly knows the number, but because of Marcus Rashford, it was 1.7 million.
Oof.
So you tell me, right? After
Miles
all
away.
these years, we're talking about millions of pounds that nobody has the money to go and do that thing. But if we take a different approach, whereby we're asking all organizations and tech professionals to be able to talk to your organization and say this: we are working together as a tech sector, coming together to maximize ESG for our organization, minimize e-waste for the sector, and to help UK PLC to achieve this at scale. What we're doing is we're asking you to contribute your devices via the consortium of network of partners to provide affordable devices. That is one way we can solve the problem. So we would like people to be aware of this, come and talk to me and my co-founder, co-director, Paul Finis, and we will help you to craft a 5-year plan, 2026 to 2030. Because when Paul set up the Digital Poverty Alliance, he put out this mission to end digital poverty by 2030. And you know what? He had a number of debates with a lot of people, not from him, but from others to him. Are you sure you can achieve that? And you know what? I will be frank with you. We don't think it's possible, but you need to have a stake in the ground to challenge people's ambition to do that. And now, because of that, guess what? The Tech Sector Consortium is now responding to say, look, we now have a way to help to achieve that.
So if someone's listening to this, and maybe it's worth just pausing and saying, who is the most influential person who might be watching or listening to this inside a company who could actually do something this afternoon? Who are those people likely to be, and what should they do?
I do think that the people that's most well placed to understand this, and they do care about this and they want to do something about it, is actually the tech leaders and the tech professionals, because that is my peer group. That is what I hear from them. I'm one of them, and that's what I know. But I also know the big problem because I'm also one of those. I cannot do this on my own. I am not equipped to have any conversation with my head of finance, my head of sustainability. I am not equipped. But now, with the establishment of this tech sector consortium, we have a way, because we can now point to this organization, which is a representation of the entire sector, to say, this consortium is providing guidance that enables me as a professional to engage in those conversations, both within my organization and outside. For example, you can now be part of the because you'll be part of the procurement process, if not the disposal process. What we want to do is to equip you with the right messages, the right support, the right guidance, so that you know how to procure equipment at the start that already covers responsible disposal at the end to achieve this. If that is the strategic part that you need help with, we are here to help you to do that. But if today, tactically, you're already doing something, and I can, again, from experience, I can tell you that people who are doing something today, I say kudos and well done, but they would agree with me that whatever they're doing is not the best. It's more like that is what they could do at that time. We're not offering them a way to do it at scale that is also that maximizes impact in terms of social impact and social value. They will get a message, and I would like them to help, because we are all part of this consortium by default, right? Either implicit or explicit. Implicitly, they all are, but I want them to also be part of this so that they can make it explicit to say, we are joining up to make sure that we can help to achieve this for UK PLC.
So it sounds like then if you've got, let's say, a CTO who's thinking, yeah, do you know what? I should get involved with this, but I can't handle all of the red tape. It's just too much for me to do, and I'll focus on my job instead. A connection with you, and then suddenly they get resources, help in order to make it happen collectively inside their organization. They can join in, and then suddenly the organization is there and doing their piece. Is that fair?
Yeah, so just to help to get going, right? First is make sure that they're aware that they can even talk about the fact that, do you know that the tech sector has got together with all these brands to help to solve this problem? So the strategy is socialize to mobilize. So the first part is just socializing,
Right.
signposting people to the fact that this thing is real, is there, number one. And of course, then as soon as you're aware, the next thing is details, because we are tech leaders, we like details to be able to operationalize it, to make things happen. So this is why one of the things we're going to be doing is to launch a website, hopefully in the next few months, where people will be able to find FAQs so that some of the obvious questions are answered. And of course, when they're ready to say they want to start building their plan about both, tactically and strategically about how to address achieving this, then of course we will come in and help them to make that happen, because this is what we're doing right now. We're working with a number of top organizations to come up with a framework so that it becomes a reference model to say, just do this. And hopefully, we would like to think that through FOMO, right, fear of missing out, this is a good thing to have FOMO for. That we say, if they are doing it, why am I not doing it? And this is how we can encourage everybody to do the same thing.
Great. So you're going to have a website so people can do that. They, of course, can find you on LinkedIn and they can connect with you. And also they can download your crib sheet, which has got a lot of information about the core of what you're trying to do and some action points and some connection details. They can download that from buildyouredge.org/downloads and get going. So I hope that some people who are listening are motivated to just reach out and start. Freddie, before I let you go, if there's one thing that somebody who is watching or listening to this, and if they've heard what you have said and thought, yeah, it does seem rather selfish of me not to get involved in some way, and I want to do something, what's one thing they could do this afternoon that will begin to help?
I think the one thing that they can begin to help is to now know that they are equipped with this information, knowledge, whatever you call it, that this is a solvable problem. And this is a solvable problem by even that person who's thinking about it, because I used to be that person that says, who am I? It's impossible. I'm Freddie. I'm nobody. Then I realized that if I can use what I have that I can possibly do to help one person, surely that's a worthwhile objective. So I would encourage everybody to have a think about that mindset of saying, this is not about solving the biggest problem. It's not about whatever. Just think about, if we can do one thing today, including being in our local community, our neighbors, our family members, if we can just help them, that is the superpower that we're able to wield for good right now. And we should continue to do that until such time that we no longer can do that. And hopefully by that time, we've done enough because of the paying forward now, that others would help us in the future when we need them.
Thank you, Freddie. There's a very well-known expression which says, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best the second best time to plant one is today. And it seems to me very, very relevant with this because I can't speak for you, but I can speak for me. I'm of an age where you're beginning to think about the future and the possibility of being excluded from things which are happening way too fast around me. And earlier on, we talked about the fact that that's only going to get earlier and earlier and earlier and earlier. And even very young people will at some point experience this sense of digital exclusion. And you cannot be unaware of people who are less fortunate than you who are digitally excluded. It came to a head during COVID, but it still exists. So I think your message and what you're doing is extraordinarily powerful. And what I have learned today more than anything, and I've learned several things. One is why I should care, because that was a big question in my mind, and you've really solved that for me. Secondly, I have a sense of what I can do. But I think the biggest sense I get is that if many people come together into a central point and work together, you have a lot better chance of
Exactly.
making a dent in this problem.
And now you see why I call it joining the dots, because it's apolitical. It's not about joining an organization. It's a mindset about being joined up with our thinking and our action.
Yeah. So, Freddie, thank you so much indeed for coming and talking to us here today. Thank you so much for everything you're doing with Join the Dots. And I know you're already a very, very busy person, but you're doing so much to help other people. Thank you enormously for that.
Thank you
And
for
if you
having me.
have, well, thank you for coming. And if you're listening or watching and you are thinking that you would like to at least explore this, I really do encourage you to reach out to Freddie. You can find all of the details on our website, and you can reach out to Freddie and maybe get going this afternoon or tomorrow. So thank you so much indeed again, Freddie, for joining us. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.